Well, good morning, everybody. This is Pat Windrow at the Cable Easel, bringing you a program which is devoted to painting and drawing from life. And when I do a scene, the best thing that one can do is to work from the monitor, which means that we go out, we choose a scene, and shoot it for 45 minutes or so, and then bring it back, and it's projected on the monitor here in the studio, and hence that's the best we can do for going outside. The scene today is from a lovely place east of here, and it's called North Haven. This is taken from the Bluffs from North Haven, and the landmass in the distance is the North Fork of Long Island. So naturally our local origination program is in full effect at this point, but we have just traveled a little farther east this time. The originality of this kind of a format is available to everybody else as well. They can take their own camcorders, go and find a scene, run a tape, and then bring it back and project it in their own living rooms. It's a technique which was devised here on this program and which works very effectively. So as you can see, the scene is almost paints itself. It's one of those lovely things whereby the composition is done for you. When I talk about composing a scene, it means that you have to have a plan. You can't just take a blank canvas and begin to apply paint on it. It needs a format, and the plan is to lay it out. So composition and layout are what I'm after now. A blank canvas with the borders that are designated on the side for many reasons. Matting can take place. Also, you carry this away from the set or from the site that you're working from. You don't get your fingers full of paint and you don't mess up a lot of oils. The first thing that you do on a layout is to find the horizon line. The horizon line, because we're on this planet, is usually straight, and because we're at sea level, if you are in outer space or in a plane, the horizon line is curved for obvious reasons, something that Columbus discovered 500 odd years ago, that we're round. But at this level, the horizon line is flat. I mean, it's perfectly straight. This is what I call a two-line composition. The sky is obviously here, and the land mass, or whatever happens, is here. Two-line composition. It's already taken a shape. Now, the diagonal is what is going to make it interesting, and the diagonal on this composition is the shoreline. It goes off at a diagonal. We now have 3 dimensions working. The third dimension has been established by the introduction of this diagonal line. There's another diagonal, which is a landmass to the right of the picture, and that comes out at a slightly different diagonal. I'm using what I call tinted turpentine. Charcoal to me does not work. It makes a mess, and I avoid it. So here is the other diagonal. Now I've introduced 3 lines, which are compositional. 1, 2, 3. You immediately know that you're on this planet. You know it's also not an abstract painting. You know that it's the familiarity of these lines are with us everywhere. Of course, there are interruptions with this composition. Namely, there is a vertical that runs here. This is the vertical of the tree. Another nice diagonal over here is doing what we call framing the scene. You have the arrangement of the tree branches over here, and when you choose a scene, it is nice and advisable to get something that is going to frame it. Don't always have to, but it's very wise to do it. Compositionally, it works better. All of the details that go on back here in this little arrangement, which is the North Fork of Long Island, and then this one, which is probably, if I knew the area better, I would say that this is a little bit of landmass from Shelter Island. North Haven, you may or may not know, is the peninsula that runs up from the South Fork of Long Island, and you catch the ferry on this peninsula, and you take the little ferry across to Shelter Island, which is one of the last few really wild and untroubled places on Long Island. I have a composition. The whole color scheme of this is what you might call a limited palette. There are no reds, there are very few greens, there are no yellows per se. It is all sort of gray, green, blue, pale blue, and so on. So a limited palette is, first of all, easy to live with, and secondly, it is very challenging when you are dealing with color. How do you make something work with few colors? It's not difficult to entice a viewer into a painting with a lot of color. You get sort of seduced by the color. There's a composition in front of me directly below the monitor here, which is called Composition in Red. It's many, many items just in red, and you can't sort of resist that composition because of the color. There's nothing really interesting. It's a parade. That's called a parade composition. Things just lining up one right after the other. But the red is very seductive. There are other times when you can rely with flower paintings whereby the flowers take precedence, and they show you that yellows and oranges and greens and mauves and violets and purples and so on are the point of the picture. But when you're dealing with limited color, it's a challenge. I'm working with oil paints. My palettes are never really very expensive palettes made of mahogany. They are just another piece of canvas board, which is lighter to carry when you go out onto the scene, and the point is to reduce your lugging equipment, too much stuff to lug around. So I try to keep it very simple. This is a lightweight palette, which can of course be chucked in an environmentally friendly container, because you don't go throwing things around that have got oils and linseed oil and all sorts of stuff in it. You dispose of these things in a concerned way. If you do throw paints away, be sure that you throw them away in an area which can receive them. You don't just stick them in any kind of a garbage can. Enough of the lecture, enough of this preaching at you. Let's get to the business of doing the picture. The way you can tell that this is a live scene is that there is a human being walking down this hill towards the beach. Otherwise, it certainly looks like a still photograph, and the tree is now moving in the breeze. So let me show you how I apply the color. You have to work fast when you're out of doors. You're dealing with elements, the changing of the time, the sun changes, clouds come and interrupt an otherwise nice clear day. So I like to apply the paint for large areas with an efficient way of putting it on with a palette knife. You can cover a rather large area rather quickly, and you've got yourself speed. Now, speed does not always mean that you're doing a great painting. As a matter of fact, doing it too speedily is a problem. People think that I work fast and that it's great to work fast. I work fast only because this is a demonstrational show. This is not what you call a production area of fine arts. I am instructing, and I do not intend to ever let anybody think that I'm producing a fine arts piece. What comes out, if it's nice and acceptable and interesting, means that the demonstration has succeeded. But it will never be disguised on this program as a piece of masterpiece, or whatever it is that are called. Some people call these pictures that come off television programs as, you can produce a masterpiece in 30 minutes. That to me is not only untrue, but it's also a snare and a delusion that people will think that maybe there is some truth to it. There's no truth to being able to produce, quote, a masterpiece in 30 minutes. No way. But a demonstration, you can in fact pull a demonstration out in a short period of time, because It's what it is. It's a lesson. I'm going to smooth out these two tones of blue with the famous fan brush that has been given so much importance. Fan brushes are only to do one thing, certainly not to paint with. They are merely to blend. I'm blending the dark area at the top with the lighter area at the bottom, because this is not going to be what you call a textured painting with palette knife or with a great deal of heavy impasto. Impasto is an Italian word for layering, putting things on with a lot of pigment. A lot of pigment paintings are fascinating and so on, but I'm trying to demonstrate the more classic technique of a fairly smooth application of paint. Paint on the nose. Okay, that's one of the hazards of the business. And so here is the general function of the dreaded fan brush, as I call it, which is evident in many, many demonstrational shows whereby they paint with it. I don't paint with a fan brush, I blend with it. So I have here now a fairly acceptable blend of going from dark to lighter, which is towards the horizon, and from now on anything that comes in front of that has got the prepared background to receive the tree branch, the tree twigs and so on, and whatever birds and whatever may be coming in the foreground of the picture. One works from the distance to the foreground. So anything that is the most distant gets put on first, then comes the middle ground, and then you work your way towards the foreground. And foregrounds are dangerous places. They can ruin a picture if you do not play with the foreground properly or pay attention to it or observe it, which I'm afraid is lacking many times in other programs, whereby the foreground kind of falls apart. Something happens in the foreground and you hope for the best. Here I like to pay a great deal of attention to the foreground, because that's, first of all, it's courteous to the viewer of the picture. You're not letting them out of anything. You're giving them a lot of detail, which is maybe one of the reasons that these pictures are interesting. The distance shot of that landmass there has got to be handled with some what I call color focus. Not only the focus of objects, but also the focus of color. Way off there is a kind of a graying area, a gray area, which is way off in the distance that may be a little bit dark. So I'm going to lighten that somewhat. You put these things on with the knowledge that you may not pick the right color all at once. A lot of people are intimidated by the business of mixing color, but there is no formula for mixing color. You do it according to the color against which it's going to go. Some tones are going to seem darker against a very pale background, so you can't say that the landmass in the distance is going to be gray. You know, what gray? Dark gray, middle gray, mauve gray, whatever gray. So you put it on and see if it works with whatever it's going against. All of these pieces of information may be coming at you rather quickly, but so be it. This is part one of a two-part program, because, as I said, you don't produce a masterpiece or anything close to it in 30 minutes. So I'm going to tell you that part one hopefully will be of enough interest for you to tune in for part two, when the conclusion of this demonstration and or lesson will take place. Hopefully the scheduling of the program will be that part one comes first and that part two comes second. There are some times when part two has found its way into the wrong slot and you have gotten the conclusion of a study, and the first part is a mystery, and it comes later. So here, while I'm talking away at you with all of these pieces of information, two things have occurred. You've gotten a place and a time. This is obviously not nighttime. It's also not summertime. Things are not green enough for it to be summertime. So a landscape painter is also a documentary maker, or a documentarian. much too long a word. Somebody who records something with a story that goes with it. And the story is, I'm identifying a place, a time of day, and hopefully a time of year. My monitor tells me that there is a very brilliant turquoise line of color across that water in the distance. Whatever caused that, I can't possibly question. It could be light from some kind of a sun arrangement, but the point is that it's there, and being a working from life means that I have to pay attention to that brilliant blue, almost turquoise color in the water, which is unusual and rare for this time of year. We're still sort of in the winter doldrums, and the water does not have what you would call these tropical tones, but it's there, and so that's why when you use reference material, such as from life, you pay attention to it. There is a and I know that I go fast, but I expect that attention can be paid even if you're talking fast. I'm now going to squeeze some white onto my palette, because white is the color which is used the most often. And I'm going to tell you about that beach arrangement in the distance, which is sort of amorphous. It's not really too clear, but it is sort of pale peachy tone of beach, meaning that the sun was hitting it with a rather effective amount of light, and that means that the beach is in fact just a sort of a streak of pale, and I've mixed pure orange, some spectrum orange and some pure white to get that creamy, peachy tone there off in the distance. And that goes on first because, as I said earlier, you work from distance to foreground. Also, according to what I'm looking at, there is evidence of human habitation over there. Witness, there are dots that appear to be houses, but they are so far away that all you do is to indicate them with dots. They are predominantly white, maybe some of them are a little bit gray, but for the most part they appear to be just pale dots back there of people who are lucky enough and apparently have the money to have shore property. We all know that shore property is privately owned. Very unfortunate, because it cuts out the ability of the population to be able to wander and understand shorelines. When you sell all the shorelines of the world to private people, that means that citizens cannot go down to that particular shore. Private property. And I'm not against private property, but I do worry sometimes that some properties are denied the average person. Okay, we're going to now deal with the application. Where's that palette knife? Here we are. The application of a large area of color, not unlike the sky. The sky had to be done quickly. If I were to imagine that I'm out there in this environment and I have to work quickly, I apply the paint in a hurry. By using my palette knife, I'm going to be able to do that. So I mix the color first. Try to get it as close to, I think, of what it is. Now, this is ultramarine blue. A lot of white, of course, and some toning down. The opposite of blue is orange or rust color. And so in order to not have what I call Kodak, Eastman Kodak blue, which is what all photographs seem to have, is water always the same color. Not possible, it's the process. We're now eliminating Eastman Kodak blue. And hopefully this has got enough gray tone in it to be able to give me the color which I think I see out there. My criticisms of color come from having spent an awful long time analyzing what I see in the way of color and being able to, either because of my obsession with it or because of my self-taught attitude, which I am, I'm a self-taught painter, means that I have a trial and error experimented for a very long time, and I have been able to kind of make a case for my knowledge for color is pretty good. I don't mean to sound as though I'm bragging in any way, but after you've been doing something for such a long period of time, such as I have, something had better have happened or you're in the wrong business. So I understand color, and I can hopefully transmit some of my knowledge of color to this program by once in a while inserting the names of the colors that I'm using and the manner in which I apply the paint. The no-no in mixing these colors is to not mix them thoroughly. If you have a puddle of blue, mix it thoroughly so that you don't get streaks. The streaks in paintings where they don't belong is the sign of the hopeless amateur. And if I get a sort of a haughty sound to my voice when I say hopeless amateur, I don't think that anyone has to remain an amateur for their whole lives. They can step into that realm of so-called professionalism with a few understandings of what the technique is. But with that in mind, I'm going to take a very short break, so don't go away. We're going to conclude or continue with this study. So I'll be right back. We are back again, and to continue a study of this view from the Bluffs at North Haven, which is the eastern end of this remarkable island. Dealing with the out of doors is always intriguing to do, and then it's even intriguing to see, because I have been painting this island now for close to 40 years, and whenever I do a scene, the immediate reaction to the people who look at it say, oh, I know where that is, or where is that, or I've been there but not in the winter, or I've been there but not in the summer. So the identification of these places is actually vital, and in order to be able to do that, you have to be faithful to what the scene is representing. And working from life or from this monitor system is about as close as we can get to being a local origination program with some credibility, that whatever you see me paint here, you will be able to recognize. Sometimes audiences come into the studio and see the display of these pictures, and they identify them as places that are familiar to them, which is, of course, the whole point of painting from life. Some strange mountain scene in some unknown land is the subject matter many times of some of these other art instructional programs, and then you can't make a mistake with that because nobody knows where it is. And here I stand actually on trial for where these places are, because you can drive to them. I defy you to drive, walk, or ride a donkey to some of the mountain scenes which are being shown as painting you know, the joy of painting, the magic of painting and so on, some strange place that is, that anything goes. It reminds me very much of when I paint pictures of onions, and people say, oh, how come you do onions? And I say, well, they're so fascinating, they have a strange texture, they're wonderful and shiny and so on and so forth. And the best part about an onion painting is that onions don't care. They don't care what you make them look like. There is no recourse. There's no standing in judgment of how I paint an onion because, you know, I mean, who's going to tell you that that onion didn't look like that? Certainly not the onion. And so this may sound like a rather comical approach to painting authentically, but it does nevertheless apply. Here, while I was talking to you about onions, I have managed to put in a little streak of very pale blue. A water surface disturbance of some kind has taken place. The wind has whipped across the water and caused this lovely streak. It's subtle, but it's there, and it's what makes for the interest on these paintings, I think, when you see these things take place. There is also a mess of little itty-bitty waves playing on the shore down here in the foreground. Those are probably going to have to be done with pure white paint and they come off at an angle and they're you know, washing right up against the sand, right up against the beach, and they once again, it's this question of, well, how do you know the wave looked like that? Well, that wave is gone. That wave is not going to tell you that that's not the way it looked. So we have actually an interesting study in interpretation here, that the waves are going to be so fleeting and so momentary that when they disappear, the best that you can do is to hope that you have grabbed them at that one particular moment. Same with clouds, same with birds, same with sunsets. That sun is gone and gone out of the way in a matter of seconds. So the speed with which you try to record these things is important. I have managed somehow to give you an impression, purely an impression of the waves that are washing up against this shoreline. While I have some pale color on my brush, I want to lighten something that is happening here in the distance, and I prefer the lightness, the light quality of the sky up here against this landmass. It is more dramatic, and it seems to have taken place. Light changes, and putting this light in here is perfectly acceptable. As you come to the end of a session, you can in fact change the atmospheric conditions, because if you are out there, those atmospheric conditions change, and sometimes they are more interesting than what took place when you were there a half an hour before or an hour before. It looks like we're coming to the end of this particular part one. It may seem like a long time to just get this much done, but I think that when the rest of the study takes place, you'll see that the preparation for the foreground was vital in the composition of this picture, and to get the elements that one is after. I am, after all, in a way, painting a portrait. It's a portrait of a place. And if you can use that attitude as what is motivating you to do this, a portrait has to be what it implies, a picture of an object, a thing, a place, a person which is recognizable. End of lecture. Sorry, this is the end of the program for now. I'm going to come back for part two some other time. I hope that you're interested enough to tune in for the conclusion. Thanks for watching. This is Pat Windrow. The only advice is keep painting, and above all, keep your brushes clean. It makes a difference. Thanks again, and see you next time. Bye-bye.